It's Election Day, and voters in more than a dozen states are heading to the polls throughout the country. When it's not a presidential election, it can actually be hard to keep people energized, especially young people. So joining me now to discuss really what's at stake is attorney Todd Belcore out of Chicago. He's the co-founder of the nonprofit Social Change. Also with us from New Orleans, independent strategist Quadricos Driskell. Thank you both so much for being here this morning on Election Day. We want to jump right in. There are a lot of eyes on a tight governor's race in Virginia, also the the election for new mayor in Atlanta. So speak to me about what is at stake for today's election and what it could really say about where we are as a country. Todd, you want to go first?
Absolutely. As it relates to Virginia in particular, it shows what could happen if we actually had laws on the books that are really allowing as many people to vote as possible. What they have in Virginia are laws that changed as recently as last year that ensure that people get access to the vote as many days as 45 days before the election. Early voting is completely available. Voting by mail is completely available. And as a result, you see record turnout. And that's what we need, not only during presidential cycles, but during every cycle, because at the end of the day, in a representative democracy, we need to make sure that the people are choosing the legislators and the leaders who are leading us, not necessarily the big money and the other sort of kind of dark corner backroom deals of appointing and things like that. So what we see happening in Virginia right now is a perfect exercise of democracy, but you compare that with other states where we've got restrictive laws on the books. There's 19 states that have laws that are making it harder for people to vote. And you've seen the way it's impacting people on the ground there as well.
Okay, Quadricos, was there anything that you wanted to add to that from your perspective as a strategist?
You know, Tip O'Neill, former Speaker of the House, said that all politics is local. And the election, usually right before midterm congressional elections, is an example of that. We know that most issues affecting our students on the school board, obviously critical race theory is a hot button topic. But we also know that are just potholes and mayoral elections and city council races. Those are the issues that directly affect voters and our livelihoods more than often what is happening at the congressional level. And so when we look at this year's elections, it's mightily important that we pay attention to who we are electing at the county level, our county clerks, our city council races and alderman races, because again, they are affecting our daily lives even more so than congressional races and federal races.
Now, speaking of lawmakers, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer scheduled a vote for tomorrow to begin whether they'll debate on the John Lewis voting rights bill. Now, we've seen marches and protests all summer over voting rights. So what could this mean, especially for young black and brown people, if they don't see any action at some point? Quadricos.
What this will unfortunately mean is further polarization between, of course, the haves and the have-nots. What this also will mean is further disenfranchisement against black and brown voters, particularly black voters. As my colleague already mentioned, the restrictive voting laws in about 19 or so states, and the many of those laws that are on the books. Even as I think about my home state of Georgia, with this most draconian voting restriction law that was signed into law last year, and how this will impact again, the local elections in the city of Atlanta. And so when we think about voting rights comprehensively, this piece of legislation, named, of course, in honor of the civil rights leader, former Congressman John Lewis, would ensure that those voting right restrictions that are being enacted across states are not, and that people actually have the right to vote.
Okay, so we know voting rights is a big one. Todd, as the co-founder of Social Change, your organization out there, of course, speaking with young people every day, I would imagine. So what are some other important issues that you're hearing from them right now that matter?
Yeah, absolutely. People right now are concerned about whether they're going to be able to afford education or not, whether they're going to be able to afford health care or not, whether they're going to be able to afford housing, just basic necessities that are part and parcel to what the American dream is composed of. And right now, people don't have those core ingredients so they can realize it themselves. So these election cycles, as much as they're about making sure people can get out to the vote, it's also important for the local politicians and statewide politicians to make sure that they're giving people something to vote for. And right now, we need more advocates fighting for those core things so more people can realize their potential.
Okay. Now, before we leave you both, we want to ask this. A lot of people, especially when it's like an